All right, all right. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you are watching this video and the location you are watching from. My name is Josette Neal-De-Stanton, and I am an assessment design partner with EOP and Envision Education. And today I have the wonderful honor, privilege, and pleasure to be interviewing my younger brother, Rene Neal-De-Stanton.
Hello, how's everyone doing? My name is Rene Neal-De-Stanton. Um, I'm a science teacher at the moment, been in education for a few years now, and um, it's glad to be here along with here with my sister. And thanks for having me, Joe.
Oh, of course, of course. So I'm super excited to be doing this because not only is it cool to be interviewing my brother, but also because we get to nerd out and talk all things science today.
Yeah.
And so um, if you're joining us and you are not in science, that's okay. You can still watch us. But we are definitely, that's our focus today. So we're going to be asking Rene a few questions about his background, what got him into science, what he's currently teaching and where. We're going to talk a little bit about the importance of project-based learning in science and how that's working for him currently. And then we'll also address a little bit around the importance of representation and equity in the science classroom. So without further ado, let's get us started. So Rene, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like what got you into science? What did you major in? Like just give us a little bit of your background.
I've always been into science, um, since a child. I've always just had an inquisitive mind, a curious mind, always asked a lot of questions and always wanted to know the inner workings of things, the how,
Mhm,
the whys of things. And I've always been curious since a child. So, as I got older, I started off doing like entertainment and dancing and things like that, but then I always had science as something that was in my back pocket. And I knew as I got older, I was transitioning from entertainment. It was going to get to a point to where I wanted to go back and get my degree in science. So I originally started looking at nursing school because I was always a person that was I was on a I wanted to go on a medical school path at first. But so I started looking at nursing, and then while I was getting into nursing classes, some of those early nursing classes, I started taking the biology classes, and then it kind of flipped. I started really getting into more of the hardcore sciences, and so that's when I changed my degree and went to Cal State Dominguez Hills, and ended up getting my degree in cellular and molecular biology, and then I went to Arizona State University, got my master's in medical nutrition because I started focusing more on health and looking at cells itself and proteins and fats and trying to get into more of the health side and nutrition correction with foods.
mhm,
Um, I started this like health group called Cheat Code during the
mhm,
pandemic to where I had people like fasting and following a certain diet plan, eating certain foods that helped everybody lose weight with the power fasting and food. So
mhm,
I was gotten more so into that through nursing. It's funny how I got into hardcore science just through
mhm.
nursing. And so right now I kind of segued into education.
So let
So
me ask you about that because you've done a lot, and of course I know. And I know I want to make sure we crosswalk a little bit of while you were doing this and you're working in the lab and you were in the field, you made this shift over to education. And so can you tell us a little bit more about like what did you start teaching? What are you currently teaching and where are you teaching at right now?
okay, so yeah, like you said, it started from me. I was working in I was at Los Angeles Biomedical Research Center. I'm doing research associate work, and it's known as the Lundquist Institute now. So I started doing lab work, and so I started looking for wanted to get out the lab more so, and started looking for uh, like lab tech jobs just to do because that's a skill that I developed from from my degree and from working at the lab. So what happened is I ended up getting a job at a private school, and I was the lab manager. So I would just restock all their materials and put their different 4 different labs together, do all that, order all the materials, help with the teachers. Um, I started a subbing because like one teacher went on sabbatical, and it had to be a situation where they lost a lot of teachers, and it was an emergency, and they were like,
Mhm.
hey, you have an experience? And I was like, oh yeah, well, matter of fact, I do. I used to teach dance. I used to teach all these after school programs. I've had experience with kids. So I just jumped in there, and it happened to be a biology class, which is easy. It's my major. So that's
Mhm.
I kind of just jumped into teaching, and it was through the private school way. And that's when I started learning about the career tech way that you could kind of get into the teaching, and I started really loving it. That's when I fell in love with it. I fell in love with
Yeah.
the with teaching at that moment.
Yeah. And I not to toot my own horn here, but he had a wonderful big sister who supported him during this
Yeah,
process. Uh,
yeah.
and I think in particular, what I want to highlight is, you going from the field to the classroom, which is something that in the area of career technical education, we try to get a lot. And so with having like in my current role, 1 foot in for the CTE, and then we're doing still doing working with other schools that don't have academies. It's really important to get folks to come in, right? And
Mhm.
so I know you went through a couple of schools, and then you are currently at where now teaching what? Can you just remind us again?
So currently I'm at EF Academy, Education First Academy, Pasadena. Pasadena. It is a international college preparatory school. Started in it's from Switzerland. They have a few campuses in the world. They have a campus in New York, campus here in Pasadena. That one
Mhm.
is opened up, I think, in Moscow, and then one in Santa Barbara. So yeah, so I teach. I'm a science teacher there. I teach physics, conceptual physics, foundations of health and wellness, and AP computer science. So I'm basically in 3 different departments. I'm in science department, I'm in the health and wellness department, I'm in the math department. And
Mhm.
yeah, I also like I have many hats there. Yeah, so I'm the
Yeah.
DIP ambassador of Pasadena, like esports coach and
Hmm.
lead advisor too. I have a lot of jobs I do at the school, but yeah,
The man with many hats, and
many
he
hats.
likes hats,
Definitely.
right?
It is.
Right. So, just switching gears a little bit to go deeper into like the practice, right? One of the things that I can say when you first started teaching and you were like, hey, like here's what I'm thinking about doing, and I know you had a lot of freedom to jump in and kind of teach these courses how you wanted. You instantly kind of gravitated towards projects. And I
Yes,
remember you coming like, I don't want to just sit and lecture. Like, I know that's my background, but I want them
yeah,
to do fun things and stuff. And so you started projects before you even got to where you're at with project-based learning. So
right.
can you just explain a little bit around like what is your experience with project-based learning when you started versus where you are now using I know PBL works.
So it's funny because when I first started, there's elements of almost like of gold standard project based learning that you almost do naturally if if you come from a science background almost because
Mhm.
it almost seems like it fits perfectly with science. So when I first was doing projects, it was more so because like you said, traditional learning to me wasn't really working for the type of kids that I had. And they needed more like hands-on, more like something that they can attach to real life experiences. So that's
Mhm.
what made me want to do more projects than sitting having lectures because I know how I learned, and
Mhm. Mhm.
sometimes it's just like having somebody you really have 20, 15 to 20 minutes that you can just really hold on your attention to before you're thinking of something
That's for kids.
something
Way
else
over
cross your
kids.
mind,
Yeah.
when you're young. And not alone like people who need to get up and move because we have people are neurodiverse. We all have different, things that we need. And so when I first started, it was more so about that, keeping them on hands-on with things. And then through learning through you, through my sister, and through then when I actually took a PBL project, the workshop, PBL workshop, and I got to get the wording, the actual idea to what I was doing already. So it was funny.
Mm.
It was like, oh, I do this. I do parts
Mhm.
of this. Not that, because when you go through, you can see how intricate and how many steps, and you can see how the scaffolding in that alone
Yeah.
makes this project that you were doing, makes it just so much bigger and so much more meaningful. So it's funny because now it's like my I know the steps to actually make the project more impactful, more so than, oh, you're just doing an experiment. Where I first started to now
Mhm.
that this is attached to real life situations, it's culturally relevant learning, it's collaboration and community building, and
Yeah.
critical thinking, development, and all these other aspects of
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
project.
So if you are, so just let's say take one of the projects that you like felt
Mhm.
worked the best and was the most engaging. Can you tell us what it was and why it was like a key project for you thinking about it as a science teacher, moving from like, oh, I'm just doing labs, but now I'm adding projects.
Okay. One that I can think of is okay, teaching like teaching can, let's say, conceptual physics. You kind of want the kids to understand the concept more than like there's math of course with it, but you want them more to understand the concept, and to do that you have to engage them within real life situations. So
Mm-hmm.
now what I
Mm-hmm.
do to teach, let's say linear motion, I teach Newton's three laws of linear motion at the same time. And to do that, I had students um, work for EF Industries, and to where they were proposing um, some roller coaster rides to Six Flags Great America. And so they needed to be able to make their rides, of course, safe. It needed to be able to pass certain types of tests that their roller coasters have to pass in real life. So this is real life proposals. This is attaching it to a real life situation. Okay. So I'm attaching the physics. I'm attaching why you need to learn how we're learning linear motion, and what's an example of linear motion is how they put these roller coasters in amusement parks. So
Mm-hmm.
now I'm setting up the project for them, and it's like, okay, what do you need to know? Need to know questions. I'm doing gallery walks with them, because in the end, what they needed to do was um, build a physical model of the roller
Mm-hmm.
coaster, and they also needed a on paper model. But while they're doing this, I'm teaching them linear motion. So there's certain things that they need in their roller coaster, and they need to understand. They need to know the height of their lift hill. They need to know the heights of their vertical loops. They need to know the centripetal force of their vertical
Mm-hmm.
loops, because it has to match in real life. They need to know the mass of their have the mass of their cart. They need to know different velocities on point how fast that cart is going to move. They need to know that that cart is going to be able to run safely through the track. And so that's how I was teaching them linear motion. It's actual. So when I'm putting it to an
Mm-hmm.
actual project, it's sticking. It's sticking to them. So now they've got to understand, oh, this is why I need to know Newton's first law, second law, and third law. This is
Mm-hmm.
what kinetic energy means. This is what total mechanical energy is. If
Mm-hmm.
top of the hill, my roller coaster is running with gravitational energy, potential energy, and it should not. That's why the lift hill has to be the highest. Because if anything goes higher than a lift hill, it's not going to work right, because it has to have the same energy it starts with. It has to have the same energy that it ends with, that it starts with. So
Mm-hmm.
now, instead of sounding like I'm just writing things on a board and writing equations on the board, that
Mm-hmm.
soaking the equations in, because they're attaching it to something real that they're
Yeah.
doing, you know.
Yeah. Okay, look at you sounding all professional, like a formal teacher. And I'm just saying this, y'all, because Renee's only been teaching for a few years. Uh,
Yes.
so, and I'm hearing you explain this like masterfully, which is like really good to hear. And so I'm hearing projects bring engagement. I heard you mention culturally relevant, it being culturally relevant. You
Mhm.
talked about authenticity. And something you mentioned indirectly about them like asking questions and thinking and making connections is critical thinking, right? All skills that we are really trying to push with students, and why we're saying projects are important. And also for science teachers and some of our STEM folks, who get a little ick sometimes when they hear projects, you really just described rigor
Hmm.
and relevance, right? Like
Right,
you did not lose the rigor of conceptual physics
right.
while completing this project. So my next question is just on this for a teacher, say let's, STEM teacher who is
Mhm,
like, I kind of want to do this, but I'm unsure, right?
mhm.
What are some advice you can give them? Or like, what is the selling point you think you would say to them of why projects are important in STEM classrooms?
I'd say this. One thing is uh one thing that I think that teachers should get that would buy teachers in is you have to include some type of field study, right? Have to
Mhm.
include field study with this. And this is what I think what the big buy-in is. For example, when I did this roller coaster project, right? It wasn't just, oh, we're doing this and we're watching videos, even though we did research. No, we took the time and we went to two different amusement parks. We went to a small one, we went to Santa Monica Pier, it's a smaller roller coaster. Then we
Mhm.
went to Six Flags. And so I put them at two different times where they can actually go talk to the engineers and people that are working on these,
Mhm.
use apps and take velocity and times of their real roller coasters and see what they're
Mhm.
doing real world action. I think the selling point has to be like you have to think outside of the box.
Mhm.
When you're a teacher and you're doing this, when you're doing project-based learning, I think a lot of people get stuck in their old ways, and they think if
Yeah.
it's not broke, don't try to fix it. But then there's a lot of things that are broken and need to be fixed.
Yes.
Education in the way that the children are learning and we all learn is not linear. It's never been linear like that. Everybody doesn't learn
Mhm.
the same. So to me, that would be one of my biggest selling points is you include field studies and field work into it as much as possible and make it
Mhm.
total experience, a learning experience.
And so you are indirectly, again, speaking ELP's language. And
Mhm.
so at Envision Learning Partners, we talk about what makes a high quality performance assessment, right? And so you mentioned gold standard with PBL Works. Our work is closely aligned with them because we are in partnership with them. And, Bob Lenz, who's headed PBL Works, actually started ELP and Envision education in general. So we speak very similarly with this.
Right,
What you're mentioning when we say high quality performance assessment criteria is eliciting of evidence of learning that matters, right? So you mentioned I'm still teaching them Newton's laws. I'm still doing these things. We have tied out criteria for success, so students know, like, we could talk a little bit more about that, but like we use rubrics, we use all these things so students know what it takes to be successful. But more importantly, you're mentioning um, authenticity in this.
right,
We said, hey, field studies, that's one of our criteria. Making it authentic, real world, real problems, seeing
right,
that, hi, this is how physics works in
right,
everything that I do. We also have open to different learner approaches, right? So you mentioned that a lot of like, there's a lot, we have neurodivergent students who can't just sit and listen to me all
right.
day. And then the last thing you mentioned is our criteria number 5, a learning experience in and of itself, right?
Mhm.
And so this is like, you give students with like, we go watch a smaller field study, then we do a bigger field study, then they take it back. That's giving them multiple chances to look at their work, review their work, make edits, and then come back.
Right.
And so it's super cool to hear you're doing
Yeah.
it inadvertently. We haven't even had a HQPA conversation yet. Um, so is there anything else that you want to bring up around projects? Because I want to actually switch back to the culturally relevant conversation. Like what's your last like pitch sell? Is there something coming up that you're doing that you want to just be like, hey, check me out here, and this is the project we're doing?
Well, right now, I mean, we're gonna go into a trajectory project into where I like to do this rocket building project, but um right now, like I myself I'm trying to head towards the gold standard. So hopefully I can get into some more workshops with PBO Works or it would be nice to get some more experience, but my school actually is going to where we're all project-based learning right
Mm.
now. So that's all subjects, all classes, no matter what it is. So
Okay.
yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you. So my last little bout of questions here is um I think I want to take some time to recognize, aside that this is a sibling
Mhm.
conversation, of how important this is that there are two Black scientists sitting in this space, right?
Yeah.
From one family. We have a third member, shout out our older brother,
Yeah,
Neal,
another one.
Neal-De-Stanton, who's a SEL counselor with Envision Education over
Right.
at Impact High School. But we are first generation, right? Afro-Latino, our family from Honduras, right? We are not the common faces you see in these spaces.
Mm.
So just speaking a little bit of your experience, like how has it been being a Black male in STEM in education? Um, and how do you connect that to the work that you're doing with students?
It could be, I'm not gonna lie, it could be rough at times because it could be challenging, because of the stereotypes that just exist, in this country is just, they are what they are. So sometimes you can feel like you're alone on an island and you're isolated. You don't get as much help as other people do, or you're really good, but your peers don't trust you as much. So you know
Mhm,
what I'm saying? You get left out of things, your ideas don't get picked up, as much. So you have to look at yourself in the mirror and do a lot of, like, there's a lot of self-love, and then there's a lot of also checking yourself you have to do. And checks and balances and making sure your mental health is there, your mental health.
mhm,
It's just like that because there's not a lot of us in some of these spaces. There's been many classrooms where I'm the only African
mhm.
male, Afro Latino male there. There's been workspaces where I'm the only uh Black man there. Many of these spaces, and in these spaces, these stereotypes, they still do live.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say they thrive in every single space, but they're alive in all
Mm,
these
mhm,
experiences. There's been times where I've been questioned, do I work here? Am I supposed to be here? Because I'm in a lab, and I'm sitting here and coming to a lab in like street clothes, or even sometimes when I'm dressed up with the lab coat on with the name tag, I'm getting questioned, am I
Yeah.
supposed to be here? So those things do exist. Should it shape your experience? No, you shouldn't let it shape your experience. It didn't shape my experience. Was it a part of my experience? Yes. And yes, does it need to be addressed? Yes, it needs to be addressed. We cannot act like it does not happen. That's one thing, that's
Right.
not, you can act like it doesn't exist. So it does exist in these spaces. Yes, you can get over it and get through it, but I'm not one of those people who are going to shy away from speaking about it,
Mhm,
Because yeah, it
mhm,
does happen. It's an issue. It's still, even trying to get your PhDs and things, there's still hoops, and we always have to do a little bit extra than other people have to do. And it seems to come out like that. And so
mhm,
also, with me, with the work I do with the DIBJ at my school and project-based learning, that's why I make sure that everything it's just it's equitable for all kids, and we
mhm,
foster an environment that makes everybody feel inclusive.
mhm,
Everyone feel inclusive. So even that comes from when I'm doing lessons and making sure that it's culturally relevant to all the students in my classes, you know,
mhm,
not just showing just one demographic of the usual that we see in textbooks. No, it's making sure that everybody uh can feel safe and want to experience themselves and see themselves in their learning environment in the
mhm,
curriculum that they have.
mhm, mhm. My wonderful colleague Raylan is going to be ecstatic to hear you in this interview mention being inclusive, because that is her area. They'll be happy. And I think that's important. I also heard the making sure students see themselves in the
Yes.
work. And so my last question for you is, for a Black scientist, Black educator who wants to step into math, science, engineering, um, or computer science, something in that, what
Mhm.
kind of advice could you give them to, one, just like do it and stick with it, and two, how to best show up for their students in the classroom while they're navigating these, the difficulties that come with it.
Yeah, I would say that you just have to make sure you give yourself mental space, yourself time to make sure that you're okay dealing with everything. And you have to be strong for yourself and for your students, and you have to show up for your students, and you have to show up with empathy, like all the time, with a lot of empathy every day and an open heart.
Yeah.
'Cause it is a tough road, but it's still very, very rewarding. The more
Mhm.
and more that my face is seen and my stories heard, and people, I get to speak to kids and I get to see, hey, you're from Oakland and you did this and you did all this dance and you did this and this, but here you are, you're in education, you're a scientist, you're teaching, you're doing these things. Yes, it's very possible. It's very
Mhm.
possible. I think we we need, a lot of us need it that are in education need to talk more. A lot of us Black scientists need to get out there and say, hey, no, yeah, this is what I do. We need to stick our chest
Mhm.
out, and let it be seen more, because it's all about representation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. More of us need to, there's plenty Black mathematicians and scientists and
Yes.
engineers, even when we throw the STEAM in and we talk about the artists who understand the connection of science and their art. And so I love that you're like, hey, our voices need to be heard. We need to
Right.
be seen. It does something when students of all backgrounds see
Right.
Black educators in the classroom.
Like,
Uh,
you can't, don't be embarrassed. That's what I say. You can't be embarrassed.
yeah,
Yeah. Right.
yeah, and we are both very proudly representing Oakland, California, and
Yeah.
know that we are that voice for the next generations coming up of like you could be where we're from and come out and still give back to your community in that
Right.
way. Uh,
Right.
this has been great. I know we could talk all day.
Yeah. I'll be here all day.
Yeah, and we are, we're siblings and we're very tight. We're my brothers and I. So we could go all day, and we were being very mild in this space because I know we we go back and forth. But before we go, is there any last thing you want to say? Do you want to share a email or anything for anyone? I
No,
I cut you
I
off.
want to say, can you still hear me? I want to
I
say
can hear
thank you.
you.
Yeah, sorry. I want to say thank you for having me. And hopefully I can come back on in another time and another topic. And of course that I'm proud of you for doing all this. And
Thank
good luck to you and more power to you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So, once again, thank you for joining us. For those of you who are watching, this has been really great. Hopefully, we can see more of these vlogs and really get to dive into some more STEM related things. I really enjoy doing this. Thank you again to my brother for taking time out in his day to do this interview. And until next time, have a good morning, have a good afternoon, have a good night. Again, depending on when you're watching this and where in the world you're looking at us from. And thanks for joining us at EOP and Envision Education. Bye.